The Atlanta Falcons are going with Michael Penix at quarterback, and that means it is time to trade Kirk Cousins. That and more on today's edition of Locked On NFL.
The new Locked On NFL. The madman Tyler Rowland is your double shot of NFL espresso with the Locked On local experts on every major story. Get ready. Rowland is revving up. The new Locked On NFL starts now. Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Football fans, welcome in to the Locked On NFL podcast, bringing you a double dose of the NFL's biggest stories with help from our local experts that know your favorite teams like no one else. I am your host, the madman, Tyler Rowland, joined today as I am every Thursday by Locked On NFL expert, the data queen, Michelle Majuk. On today's episode, we are going to talk about the Kansas City Chiefs' decision to play or bench Patrick Mahomes. We're going to discuss a Thursday night football matchup between the Denver Broncos and the Los Angeles Chargers, but we are going to start with the Falcons' decision to roll with Michael Penix and why it is the end of Kirk Cousins in Atlanta. Before we get into it, I do want to thank you for making Locked On NFL your first listen and for being an everydayer here with us at the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. It's crossover Thursday here on the Locked On Podcast Network, so make sure to check out your favorite team's crossover episode and download the Prize Picks app using the code LOCKEDONNFL to win $50 instantly when you play $5. Michael Penix finally gets the spot for Atlanta. Michelle, just quickly, do you think it was the right move? Because I think it was the move they had to make.
I think it's a move you have to make. It's very interesting. I mean, they're 7-7. They're only one game back from the Buccaneers to make the playoffs. And really, it's if they tie, like they get in. So they're not even really a full game back because if they, whatever. But I will say he can't keep playing Kirk Cousins when he has one touchdown and 9 interceptions since week 10. Like, this offense has been atrocious. And I maybe you can blame it on the Achilles injury from last year, but he was doing okay the first half of the year. It's not like he was absolutely garbage like he has been. So I don't know what has come over him lately, but I think you have to make the move and see if Michael Penix Jr. can give you any more spark.
I think really, if we're honest, what's happened is he had the Achilles injury. That is a terrible, devastating. That's like the worst injury you can have nowadays. It has replaced the ACL. If you got an ACL tear when I was growing up, your career might be over, let alone being back. They've kind of moved past that with modern science, but the Achilles is still a devastating injury that nobody wants to get. And then you add in the age. I think Tom Brady has kind of skewed some people, and Aaron Rodgers has maybe skewed some people to where we expect these quarterbacks to play longer. And maybe Kirk Cousins just isn't a guy who can do that. You know what I mean? So I think the age and the injury do factor in. But for me, I'm going to pat myself on the back a little bit here. I had a bold prediction before the year when we did those sorts of predictions that Michael Penix would be the best quarterback for the Atlanta Falcons. Now, we're only going to get 3 games to maybe prove that. But I think when people say, like, how can you make this move when you're still within the shot of the playoffs, like they're going to a young guy who can't win, Michael Penix might actually be the better quarterback. And if you want to make the playoffs, playing him may be the right thing to do there. So I think that's actually a reality. I'll tell you, though, my guy Aaron Freeman from Locked On Falcons, he sounds a little more skeptical about that Falcons playoff run with Michael Penix than maybe I am.
So what does Michael Penix being the starter mean? And so my answer, guys, is we'll see. That's basically it. Like, I don't go into it with the same expectations I think a lot of other people do. I think the immediate knee-jerk reaction is going to be that Michael Penix is going to come in and save the Falcons season. They're going to run the table with Michael Penix, and he's going to lead to the playoffs. And again, that would make an incredible story. We will absolutely, have fun with that if that is the case. But as I'm saying, the Falcons do need to win out in order to keep their playoff hopes alive. They need to win this upcoming week against the New York Giants. They didn't need to win on a recently flexed Sunday night game against the Washington Commanders. And then they need to win in week 18 against their hated division rival, the Carolina Panthers, who have been known to derail Falcons playoff hopes historically in a season finale type of performance.
So it's still a hard path, and they need the Tampa Bay Buccaneers to lose a game as well because they are one game behind in the standings there. So I think it's a tough spot for them, but I think that Michael Penix ultimately is the better quarterback.
So I have a fun little note here. So Penix can become the first rookie quarterback to make multiple starts and lead his team to the playoffs after having his first start come in week 10 or later on a 500 or below team. So Penix would be the first quarterback to ever do it. So it's not going to be easy for him, that's for sure. But Atlanta's lost 4 out of the last 5 games, right? Their offense is averaging 14 points per game since week 10.
Yep.
Even if your whole goal is to just make the playoffs, and you say that might be hard to do with a rookie quarterback for the last 3 games, and Kirk Cousins somehow gets you there, what was your ceiling, right? With Kirk Cousins, he's playing so bad. Your ceiling was to make it, get into the wild card round, and
Smoked by Philly.
Probably get killed. At least Michael Penix Jr., who knows what he can become, right? At least he gives you hope. So I think this move makes a lot of sense. It's a risky one for sure. But again, what are you risking? Oh, a wild card loss. That's what you're risking.
And I think with you look at Kirk Cousins, it's time to trade him. They need, if they're going with Michael Penix now, you need to go with Michael Penix next year. You only get so many years of that rookie contract. And I think you look at some teams that make sense. The Tennessee Titans have $63 million in projected cap space. If you trade for Kirk Cousins, not only does it help the Atlanta Falcons by taking about, $27.5 million off of their bill and giving it to the team that you're trading for, but also you could incentivize teams by giving some draft compensation. I think it would be a trade where the Falcons would have to lose the draft pick equation. Like they'd have to give up a better pick than the team taking Kirk Cousins because it helps them with the money. But that is clearly the right way to go. Cousins has a no trade clause, so he could play hardball and force them to release him, which would be like $65 million in dead cap money. But do you think the Falcons should trade him now? And do you have any landing spots maybe that you think make sense?
The only landing spot I can see that would make any sense at all would be the 49ers, right? Brock Purdy's going to want to get paid. Brock Purdy's had some injury concerns with his throwing arm, like all over it, right? With the shoulder now.
Yeah.
And Kyle Shanahan loves him some Kirk Cousins. He does. That's where, he's always wanted Kirk Cousins, I feel like. So that's the only place that would make sense. It's also the only place that I think Kirk Cousins would accept the trade to. Why accept the trade to go to the Titans? Like, no, just release me and I can go pick where I want. I can see the 49ers, but that's the only place.
I mean, that's a good, maybe the New York Giants. I mean, they could be in the market looking for somebody. What about the Indianapolis Colts? You know what I mean?
They did this with Matt Ryan. I don't think they're going to do it again.
Exactly why they might do it again. That's, history repeats itself. But I agree with you. There aren't a ton of logical destinations, but San Francisco is a super, super interesting one because you're right. It would give him a place to go where he would probably be interested to go. The question is then, what happens with Brock Purdy? Do you think that would be followed with a trade of Brock Purdy to a different team?
I don't know. I'm a Brock Purdy believer. I think he's a good quarterback. Right. I don't know if you feel comfortable paying him just yet what he wants. He's saying he's not going to take a discount, which I personally think he should, which is easy to say. But at the end of the day, this might be your last chance to ever make this amount of money in the NFL. If you have another bad season, you wouldn't get paid at all. And really, the 49ers are your best shot. So take the $45 million a year. But if he's asking for 60, you can say, hey, we're going to go trade for Kirk Cousins instead. So maybe you have them both on your team, right? And maybe he learns behind Kirk for a year. I don't know. It could get crazy this offseason. It could get crazy. But with that being said, we're going to move to a Thursday night football game that could get crazy. Probably not, but maybe. But it's Locked On NFL, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by the College Football Playoff on TNT. It's that time of year again. The College Football Playoff is back. And with the newly expanded 12-team format, it's guaranteed to be bigger and better than ever, bringing you all the hard-hitting and high-flying excitement that you love. TNT Sports coverage of the College Football Playoff begins December 21st, starting with the College Football Playoff kickoff show presented by AT&T at 11 a.m. Eastern. It's going to lead into our first matchup, the Southern Methodist University Mustangs battling the Penn State Nittany Lions at noon. Then you get the Clemson Tigers looking to upset the Texas Longhorns in a showdown at 4 p.m. Eastern. Don't miss a moment of the action. Make sure that you watch the College Football Playoff presented
by Allstate live on TNT, True TV, TBS, and Max. Today's episode is also brought to you by Hillsdale College. Time is our most precious commodity, so don't waste it scrolling through the same mind-numbing content for hours and hours. How can you spend it wisely to improve yourself? Our sponsor, Hillsdale College, is offering more than 40 free, that's right, free online courses, including Constitution 101, the meaning and history of the Constitution, Introduction to Free Market Economics, or my favorite, the rise and fall of the Roman Republic. It's clearly my favorite. All of the Hillsdale's courses are self-paced, so you can start whenever and tune in wherever. Plus, you can go deeper with readings, quizzes, discussions, or just enjoy the lectures. Go right now to hillsdale.edu/lockedon to enroll. There's no cost, and it's easy to get started. That's hillsdale.edu/lockedon to register. That's hillsdale.edu/lockedon. All right, Michelle, let's continue today's edition of Locked On NFL. We talked about the Atlanta Falcons benching Michael Penix, why it was the right move, and why Kirk Cousins is probably on his way out the door. Before we continue, I do want to thank you again for making Locked On NFL your first listen. Now we got to talk about this Thursday night football matchup, and the Denver Broncos take on the Los Angeles Chargers, and there is a lot at stake for the Denver Broncos, who could potentially clinch a playoff berth, but also could move up in the seeding.
But Denver also has a chance to potentially move up to the 5th seed this weekend, and that would be made possible by a Broncos win if the Ravens lose to the Pittsburgh Steelers and if the Miami Dolphins lose this week as well. If that's the case, if that happens, the Broncos after Sunday could very well be sitting in position as that 5th seed, which would set up at the playoffs, and then they would set up a potential matchup there with the Houston Texans, who have been kind of a mid up and down team so far this season. They have a good defense. They have good defensive players, but man, how crazy would it be to kind of come full circle in a situation where Denver last year had a chance to go to the playoffs if they could have beat the Houston Texans last year, and now all of a sudden Sean Payton bringing his quarterback potentially to Houston in round 1. If that's the way it ends up playing out, man, that would be a fun, exciting thing to watch.
Where are you at with the Broncos right now, and do you think they could beat Houston if that's the matchup that they get?
I think that's the only way they would have a shot to win,
Ooh,
right?
okay.
I don't. So let's say the Chargers and Broncos here are fighting for the 6th or 7th seed. Let's say the Ravens beat the Steelers this week, which I do expect them to do. I'm a Steelers fan. That makes me sad. So Steelers would then bounce back to 5. They have the head-to-head over the Broncos and the Chargers actually this year. So if you're fighting for 6 and 7, and we'll see if the Chiefs can hold on to that number 1 seed, I think you want to be 7 over 6 this year, because I would much rather go face the Chiefs than go face the Bills in Buffalo. So we'll see what comes down to with this game. It's kind of interesting because this game could really shut down anything that matters in the AFC.
Yes, it could.
Like if the Broncos end up winning, it's going to make it really hard for the Bengals to really have a shot. And then it's going to kind of make it lame the rest of the year. I'm going to be rooting for the Chargers just to have some more craziness in the AFC.
Just to shake it up. That's fair. I hear you there. I honestly, and I know, where your loyalties lie, Michelle, but I think that the Broncos could beat the Steelers. I think if the Steelers don't make an explosive enough plays, if the defense doesn't create turnovers, I think Denver's defense could give Pittsburgh problems if they aren't hitting explosives, because I just don't trust Pittsburgh's run defense. So I think the Broncos actually have a pretty good chance if they do get to 5 and get to play Houston, or even if they end up playing Pittsburgh. But if Pittsburgh drops down to 5 and then you got to go play the Ravens, I would still rather play the Ravens than the Bills or the Chiefs personally, but definitely makes it a much more difficult task. Either way, every time we bring up the Broncos on the show, I just try to admit I was wrong about the Broncos this year. I did not believe in what they were doing, did not believe in Bo Nix, did not think that the defense could be as good as it is. But Nick Bonita might be the defensive player of the year. Like, he at least deserves to be in the conversation with the way that he has played. He's been absolutely fantastic as an edge rusher for the Broncos this year. And I just kind of believe in their mojo and the things that they do well. I think it kind of travels. So I do think the Broncos have a chance to win a playoff game, but I think it would give them just an insanely better chance if they were to win this game against the Chargers. But the Chargers, on the other hand, they're really looking rough right now. And they set themselves up early in the season to be in a position where they're probably not going to miss out on the playoffs, but they're going to have to play really, really well to beat the Broncos this week. And my guys over at Locked On Chargers talked about the keys to victory.
You have to have a better plan against the blitz. You've talked about it this week. I talked about it. So many long developing plays that absolutely crushed them against the Buccaneers because the Buccaneers blitzed over 70% of the time, second highest that Justin Herbert's faced in his career. And what happened? It totally nuked everything the Chargers had going on. They couldn't figure out their protection. And now going into this week, you have Jamari Sawyer potentially filling in for Zion Johnson, who's missed practice all week and had to leave the last game with an ankle injury. And also, you just totally got blitzed to hell in the last game, and it, you couldn't do anything about it. So you have guys, right? Ladd McConkey can win quickly. Josh Palmer has shown the ability to win quickly. If you had any sort of screen game, it would be a gigantic boost if you're going up a team that blitzes a lot. And the Broncos blitz the 5th most in the league and rank 5th in the NFL in pressure percentage. The Bucs ranked 10th now. This is a team that gets pressure at a higher percentage than even the Buccaneers did. If you don't have a better plan against the blitz, I just don't know if I have any faith in what this offense is going to do. And if I'm the Broncos, that's the blueprint that I'm trying to roll out there.
With Justin Herbert being banged up and probably being less mobile than normal, the run game, they ran for like 32 yards last week. The lack of weapons on the outside, I am going to blitz Justin Herbert all day. I am going to be bringing up this game tomorrow in our FanDuel Friday best bets because there is no way that the Broncos are losing this game. Don't believe it.
There's no way the Broncos are losing this game. See, I could see them lose because I just think this is going to be a super low-scoring game, and both offenses are going to stink. I mean, we're talking about two of the best defenses in the league, right? Both the Chargers and the Broncos are allowing the fewest points per game this year. They're tied at 17.6 points per game. They're both really good defenses. Look at the teams that both of these teams have beat. These are not good teams. I think overall they're not teams that are going to push their way in the playoff.
I think the Broncos are much better than the Chargers personally. I think they're a tier above them.
They've won against nobody.
That's fair.
They have one win against a team that currently has a winning record this year, and it's against the Buccaneers in week 3. I mean, the rest of their wins are against 500 or worse teams. I know the Chargers just got their booties beat by the Bucs last week, and the run game it is an issue for sure. Like, who would have thought J.K. Dobbins being the main glue of this offense this year? I think it'll be a close game, and it's going to come down to who makes those small mistakes. That could come down to special teams, a fumble in special teams, a pick 6, which the Broncos have been killing with these defensive touchdowns lately. I won't be surprised if the Broncos win, but I definitely wouldn't say it's a lock.
All right. Well, then you can fade me and take the Chargers with the points. I don't know exactly what the spread is on FanDuel right now, but I just think the Broncos are a better football team with more capabilities. But
they
either
also
way,
don't have a run game, right? The Broncos run game.
It's not as bad as the Chargers, I guess, in my opinion. I think when it comes down to it, but yes, that is still a fatal flaw of the Broncos when it's time to actually win in the playoffs. But either way, at least a good Thursday night football game. 2 playoff teams, even if they're on the lower end of playoff teams, but they should put on a decent game to watch, at least on Thursday night football. But will we get to see Patrick Mahomes this weekend? I don't think that we should, but Kansas City seems awfully optimistic. It's Locked On NFL, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Speaking of FanDuel Friday, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. You can get ready for the final few weeks of the regular season here leading into the playoffs. And right now, new customers at FanDuel get $5 or you bet $5 and you get $150 in bonus bets if you win. Again, bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of a game, you can check out the latest stats. You can view live play-by-play and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. Again, you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. All right, Michelle, we're going to cap off today's edition of the Locked On NFL podcast. We talked about the Michael Penix decision and getting rid of Kirk Cousins now. What a disaster move that was. It was always either you were right about Penix or you were wrong about Kirk Cousins or vice versa. There was never a way to thread the needle perfectly. So I'm glad we're at least moving on there. Talked about that Thursday night football matchup, but Patrick Mahomes, ankle injury. Saw him hobbling around at the end of the game against the Browns last week. He was a full go in practice, apparently, full participant. Optimism coming from Kansas City that he may play. And our guys over at Locked On Chiefs talked about, the possibility of letting him roll.
So, you're going to, if you're the Texans, you're going to have to prepare for both quarterbacks. And if Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes just came out and said, he's going to play, or he's not going to play this week, you take away all the mystery. So I can't divorce from the fact that Chiefs we're going to do that anyway. So it's kind of regardless of how Mahomes looks and feels. But you really get into it and then you start thinking of, okay, and Andy Reid addressed the question today, which was, are you going to take into consideration Saturday, Wednesday? Because we know that coming back after playing on a Saturday and then having to play that quick on a Wednesday on an ankle sprain isn't easy. So, in one way you could certainly look at it and say, look, if you want Patrick Mahomes to play on Christmas Day, you probably don't want him to play on Saturday.
Yeah, I think it would be crazy to play Mahomes, and I do agree that it's just gamesmanship. They would be insane to put him out there and risk the long-term injury and playing, like they said, Saturday and then Wednesday on Christmas. Like, I personally would sit him the next 2 games. I'm sure the NFL would be angry if they sat him on Christmas. With that in mind, you got to at least sit him this week.
I think they absolutely need to sit him this week, right? Because they have a 2-game lead over the Bills. Now I know the Bills, if they get those 2 wins and the Chiefs lose, or the Chiefs lose 2 games, that the Bills would win that tiebreaker. But at least sit them this week, right? You can beat the Texans at home. This is a home game. Your defense is playing lights out. CJ Stroud and the Texans offense is struggling. It's not like you've been leaning on your offense to win games anyways. Like, Mahomes is having the worst year of his career. He's still Mahomes. He can make those big plays at the end of games, which has helped them. But their offense is not winning them games anyways. Lean on your defense. Now, if you lose this week, then Mahomes, if he can come back, make him come back, because you need to win the next 2 games. But those are your 2 harder ones. You're on the road against the Steelers in the really tough divisional matchup where you almost just lost to the Broncos at home, a few weeks ago, right? So just see what happens here. And then if you end up winning, you could sit him again. You really don't need him until you lose that first game, right?
Yes.
Let yourself lose that 1 game. And then after that, then he has to come back. Yep.
I'm with you there. That's the question is how much is a healthy Mahomes worth versus the first seed and the bye? I would rather have Mahomes completely healthy than have the number 1 seed in the bye, because you've proven that you can win on the road. Like, I know that that's critical, but if they could find a way to thread the needle where they, sit him this week, like you're saying, come back Christmas, you get a big break from Christmas to your final game against the Broncos. If they could thread the needle perfectly there to sit him for a week and still get the number 1 seed, that would be the ideal scenario for Kansas City. But I just think it's so risky. I don't know. The NFL is going to pressure them to play him on Christmas against the Steelers no matter what. But just that many games and that quick of days, I think they have to at least consider sitting him for both of them.
I think he plays on Christmas. I really think they should sit him this Saturday.
They have to sit him this week, at minimum this week. It would just be crazy.
But also, if he says if he's good to go, he's good to go. We've seen him play in a high ankle sprain, right? In the 2022 playoffs. And he was fantastic. Now that made a lot more sense for him to play, right? I mean, you lose and you're out. This one doesn't make as much sense, but we saw him look fantastic. He made it through those playoffs without getting more injured. So, I mean, the dude's a beast. So he dislocated his kneecap and was back in a blink of an eye. So not only is he have the NFL gods on his side for just the luckiest plays of all time that he's not even on the field, but also with these injuries, he just snaps back so fast.
I think we have to consider maybe he is one of the NFL gods, and he's the one benefiting his own team. It's up there right now for consideration. But with that being said, that is going to do it for today's edition of the Locked On NFL podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in. Make sure you check out the afternoon edition of Locked On NFL with Tony Wiggins in the barbershop. But make sure you get subscribed, stay subscribed as well. That's going to do it for me today, your host, the Madman, for my co-host, the Data Queen, Michelle Majuk, as we tell you every single episode. Stay safe out there.
Bye, y'all.